Hey folks, David Stewart here. I'm going to try something a little bit different today. Maybe we're going to try it out for a week. We'll see if I can do it. Daily trending, where I just talk about something, give some commentary on something that's trending, and maybe the number one trending topic on Twitter, which is what I'm doing today. This is number one as I recorded the video, which is human capital stock. And I have actually two things to say about this. So let's listen to this. This is a term that kind of went viral from somebody talking on CNN.
We don't have, our capital stock hasn't been destroyed. Our human capital stock is ready to get back to work, and so that there are lots of reasons to believe that we can get going way faster than we have in previous crises.
All right, so let's talk about the terms he used here. This is an example of when an economist uses terms that are really directed. They're coming out of the language of economists and being directed towards lay people who then are not quite understanding what they're talking about. Now, it seems like, hey, he's talking about us like a bunch of cattle, and I'll actually get to that, but human capital stock, like a big stock of livestock, like we're cattle to be herded around and devoured when we are fully plump. There might be some truth to that, but really what we're talking about is some economic terms. Economists will often use terms like human capital or human resources. Obviously, if you're talking about human resources and you're within a company, you are kind of dehumanizing people a little bit. You're like, well, we have natural resources, we have oil and trees, and we have people, and those are our resources. Like, people are resources, but the essential unit of economic activity is the person. So it's people that turn oil and trees into products or whatever your other resources are. So humans are a resource from a capital perspective. And likewise, you have capital goods like machines that make cars, and you have human capital, which is people who make the cars, or people who make the machines, people who enable that productivity to exist. So the human capital of, say, an engineer would be pretty high because he can design the machine which makes the cars. The human capital of a lumberjack is whatever it is because he knows how to cut down the trees. So human capital means people being able to go out and do productive things, usually things that are productive in their area of expertise, which enhances their value. That's what he's talking about here. But when we say human capital stock, it's a little bit dehumanizing to say, well, look at all this. There's all these people, and we have this stock of people that we could just put to work to make some money. It does seem a little bit dehumanizing. At the same time, what he's really talking about is, despite the coronavirus, at this point, it's killed like 100,000 people in the U.S., the people who are actually going to go out and do productive things in the economy, that hasn't really been affected, as we probably knew it would be. Those deaths and the other health consequences had been mostly focused in specific groups, which is usually what happens with disease. And so we have a lot of healthy adults who can just go out and get back to work, supposedly, right? Now, the other side of this, people are cattle. It's easy to think that, because you go out and you look at the world, and we have a bunch of people that are corralled into various places and put into various professions, either by their own will or maybe by the state. If you're in like a more totalitarian system, they go out and produce stuff, and the state just siphons up a portion of that wealth. So we go out, we do whatever we do professionally, and the state taxes us. They just take away part of our production. So if you look at the state as the farmer, people are the cattle, people are the crops, and they're giving their portion of crops to the farmer, and that's why he keeps them around, is to siphon off their productivity. Even in something like a Democratic or Republican system, this is going to go a little bit deeper, but really all the ideologies that we spend time talking about, socialism versus capitalism, communities versus nations, whatever it's going to be, multiculturalism versus monoculturalism, all of these ideologies don't really have a big effect on the top levels of politics, what actually happens. Politics at the highest level is really about distributing treasure, the same as it was hundreds of years ago in the feudal period. We have kind of a reestablishment of the feudal system, but minus most of the violence that gets associated with it. So you have, instead of Lancastrians versus Yorkists literally fighting and killing each other to support a claimant to the throne, you have an election. And you have various corporations that, rather than ruling physical fiefs, they rule virtual fiefs. Google is one of the most powerful. It rules a huge portion of the intellectual space of the internet, including YouTube. And if it's going to support one of its claimants to the throne, say the presidential seat or of various elections, it does so by giving it money, and maybe even giving it practical support like suppressing searches for its opponents. In the case of Google, it can actively empower somebody to get into office. It holds a key to power called information on the internet. Same thing with Facebook. So these are kind of like virtual lords, and they're going to support various people getting into various positions of power. And the return for that is distribution of treasure and favors. So, if you were back in the Wars of the Roses, if you were supporting a Yorkist to the throne, the presumption would be, hey, I'll support your claim to the throne, but you got to marry my daughter, something like that, right? And so it's the same thing. Hey, we'll support you being president, Hillary, but we don't want any antitrust lawsuits coming our way. We'd like to make sure the Department of Justice stays off our back. And that's exactly, I think, what's been happening in the political space now for a long time. And once you realize that that's really what we're dealing with, we have kind of big contributors to various political causes. They're like the keys to power. They're the people who the politicians need in order to seize the throne, if you will, to win the election. So we've civilized the Civil War. And the Civil War, the two claimants are the Democrats and Republicans rather than Lancastrians and Yorkists as we had during the English Civil Wars. But we have the same sort of thing going on, is that when one person wins, everybody else is on the outs. Oh no, you supported a Yorkist and the Lancastrians on the throne, you got to worry. Same thing, vice versa. You supported a Republican, now a Democrat wins, you got to worry. I think this is a lot of the big crisis in Google, and I've seen a couple of things. I'm not going to get too deep into it in this little video, which is now no longer all that little, going over 6 minutes here, that Google is kind of going away from the total woke thing and giving some instructions to not talk about that stuff as much because they are forecasting a Republican victory this fall. But they supported the wrong candidate, which puts the Lords of Power into a little bit of worry. We supported the Yorkists, and now we got a Lancastrian on the throne. We got to worry. We got to worry about what's going on because we have those keys to power, and that Lancastrian is going to want them. We have control over our domains, but we're in bigger trouble now, and we're not going to get our piece of the treasure. Maybe Google has to worry about antitrust or something like that. Same thing with Facebook. So that's my little deeper thought there, is that we're kind of in a very civilized, violence kind of removed, continual civil war in a feudal system, and we're just the little bits and pieces that have to be convinced through all of the different propaganda that eventually results in somebody taking power, taking the throne. So thanks so much, guys. I'll see you guys next time, maybe tomorrow, as I talk about another trending topic.